Here we are in the, third Wednesday of January.
That's flying. Good morning, everybody.
Hopefully everybody was safe. I know there were some storms this weekend, some other issues, as people would know. Events in Atlanta, events everywhere, but we're glad that you guys are here. We're here, a little tight and a little cramped, but we're good to go.
Yes, we are.
So we are today broadcasting multiple ways from StreamYard. We've got other platforms, and we're back on IG as well, and we're planning on doing that every single week. So all of our IG viewers, glad that you're with us back again. Today it's just going to be myself and Sam, but we've got some, I think, very, very interesting news that actually one of our viewers asked me the question on. So I did some research, and it was something I myself didn't know about. We'll be getting to that very shortly. But before we do that, how was your week, Sam?
It's always a great week. You know, we have so many things that is up and coming. A lot of events, a lot of concerts that we're working on and curating, and also looking to integrate those within the cannabis space. So we're definitely hoping to bring more into the fold for what we're doing. We got a tremendous thing going on, and we want to keep building on it.
Absolutely. And some of the news and notes from what happened this week, something I'm sure a lot of people have thought about, but yet we haven't delved into, for example, CBD advertising. You ever noticed that? You ever seen that on Google or anywhere else?
As of now, it has been totally invisible. So, I mean, it's something that because of legislatures, the powers that be, especially Big Pharma owns most of that space. So they're going to limit how much cannabis and CBD can get into that advertising space. But as the awareness of the cannabis space, CBD, as it moves forward legally, whether it's on the medicinal or on the recreational side, now the opportunity to advertise is there. But until they get the safe banking in place, it still may be a little bit of a taboo in certain states. Other states, it will take that first great leap forward.
Right. We talked a few months back that MLB has entered in a partnership with a cannabis company out of Charlotte. I don't know how immersive that's going to be on advertising, but one of the big reasons is products currently on Google's unapproved pharmaceuticals and supplements list. So you go to Google, it's not going to come up.
Yeah. And Google still controls that. And because it is a worldwide platform, it's going to create those limitations. The beautiful thing about North Carolina is that it is Indian country, I think Cherokee Indian country. So the availability is wide open right there. It's rapidly there. And it's because the exception has been made into law because of that, because of the tribes that are local there.
No, absolutely. But one of the bright sides is some of this is going to change at least a little bit. Now the users in California, Colorado, and Puerto Rico will see ads for FDA-approved pharmaceutical with CBD, topical hemp-derived products with less than 0.3 THC.
That's standard. They definitely are staying along on what's the legal limit. So we just need the other states to jump on board and pass it.
Yeah, and what's crazy about it is you can drive almost every state that I know of, at least. You can see CBD stores, smoke shops. They're going to sell these things, but yet we can do brick and mortar advertisement, but you can't do it online yet.
No. Pretty much the online space is still controlled by the Fed. So that medium right there, because there has to be built-in limitations, like entering into the site, got to be 21,
right,
or 18. So the legalities from the state, they vary. So until they get them all across the board, the limitations I still expect to be there full-fledged.
No, and that makes a great point of what you stated, because you press that you're over 18, over 21. Yes, as far as I've seen, they don't actually make you put a birth date in or prove any further, but it is controlled minimalization of the advertisement that way. Where if you go to Google, ads pop up, 7-year-old could see it, 14-year-old. It's not at this moment going to be controlled as far.
That's correct. And there should be a filter on Google. Even the access to certain information, it should be limited, especially when you look at certain age groups. The limitation should be there. The parental fact that it falls on the parental filters that you add from browsing the internet. But for the most part, still look at Google, look at how they track information, and they provide that information to the federal government.
Right.
So understand that partnership is there for a particular reason. It's going to stay there. The government will have first dibs on anybody who runs a particular search in a particular area. And they'll be able to track, chart, and file that and note it. So that way, the repetition of it, they'll have what they need for documentation.
Mm-hmm.
So please be careful of what you
Absolutely.
search for and what you seek out.
No, absolutely. That's a great point. So Maryland now, and the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., as we all know. D.C. metropolitan includes Maryland and Virginia, since the radius for those who have not been there is a short drive, very close, in addition to D.C. Now, the three jurisdictions collectively known as DMV, and no, not Division of Motor Vehicles. They've had very different laws regarding the cannabis, and that's one reason why we say know your area, know your limitations, know what's allotted. As of the writing currently, cannabis is legal to possess and use in D.C., as we've talked about, but no cash available to exchange. But only medical marijuana is legal to sell. Virginia legalized adult use in 2021, but there's no legal market yet. Maryland legalized in November this past year. Plans are underway to set up the market by July 1st. It's a big job. Summer will be here before we know it. As we know, we're almost in February. Will they make that deadline in time? And even if they make the deadline, how much help is it going to make for that DMV area?
I just want to give particular emphasis to what you just said. Cannabis is legal to possess,
right,
and use in D.C., but you can only sell it if it's medicinal.
Yes.
So you're still set up. Mm-hmm. So don't get caught selling it.
Right.
just hands down, bottom line. Don't get caught selling it. You can possess it, but if I'm not mistaken, law enforcement controls the narrative, possession with intent to distribute.
Correct.
So please understand, if you are in this part, the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia, which is you can call it a tri-state
pretty much
mashup, even though DC is a district. It's legal to possess and use it, but only medicinal is legal to sell.
Right.
Very key point. I want to keep putting emphasis on that. And then when you jump to Virginia legalized adult cannabis use in 2021, but there is no legal market yet. Key point. There is no legal market yet. So adult use, hey, yeah, you can use it, but guess what? You can use it, but what about the possession?
Right.
What about traveling from one place to the next? You still have a gray area there where caught red-handed. So still, please be aware of the laws and understand what's going on. I definitely want to repeat and give emphasis to that. Let's talk about Maryland. Legalized in November. Plans are underway to set up a market by July 1st. It's legalized, but not till July 1st.
Right.
So please be careful. Possession, you still get caught. Possession, you will still go through changes. And possession has not been decriminalized yet. So please, I want to just make sure everybody understand that part. As you go out there, use for medicinal purposes or just for health, for your own health and wellness, still be aware and just understand where you are in that limited space, because it's limited. And you got to understand the application of the law and the limitation that comes along with it, so that way you are safe, you make it home, you make it to work, and you do it all over again the next day.
Right, and that's one reason why we always talk about check your laws, because I can't speak and this has changed or not. Maybe one of our viewers can. I know a few years back, probably honestly 10 to 15 years ago, Louisiana, for example, at age 18, you could manufacture alcohol. You could buy it. You could sell it. You could serve it in the restaurants. But at 18, you weren't allowed to consume.
Absolutely not.
So you're telling me that at 19, I can go into a package store and buy it and I'm not going to drink it?
That is definitely a catch clause.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing I'm seeing with this.
Yeah.
Identical. They're giving you the bits and pieces of the cracker to make it sound great, but then they're waiting for you to take that bait as the mouse on the mousetrap so they catch you like that.
When you caught, you caught. I'm sorry, I don't want to laugh because that is a sensitive matter, because you go through a change. You possibly can go through a trauma at that point. No one wants to lose their freedom. No one wants to lose any monies that are already in their pocket to an undue and unfound process. So please be aware, be careful.
Well, and that's also going to tie in exactly with the big story that we're going to get to in a few minutes.
Okay.
But first of all, Sin City, Las Vegas.
Okay.
They were out there a couple months ago. They have something coming that is extremely unique and very interesting. Would you like to stay in a hotel that allows cannabis consumption, including smoking, when you're visiting Vegas?
Let's go to mindsets on that. We have different varying minds when it comes to consumption. You have some that truly has to use it for medicinal.
Correct.
All right. For the afflictions that they have in their life, they need it. It helps with either some form of pain management, any form
PTSD,
of nervous disorder, anything of that nature. So once again, when you think about it, and not having limitations or restrictions to consume for medicinal, people who are able to stay in the hotels under those circumstances, no problem. For the ones that do it recreational, that means that it's widespread. They use it. They love the feeling that comes along with it. You still got to ask yourself, how much tolerance do you have in that space around the people when they're using it with no limitations or restrictions, wide open, every place, every space, and then also the varying degrees of the cannabis itself, the burn itself, the vapors itself. I've walked in places and my lungs were on fire as soon as I walked in those places. So you still got to ask yourself, well, how much is enough and how much is too much? So me, I love the space, but I would not want to be in a hotel where there are zero restrictions, because if it's wide open, it's like walking in a club and 99 out of 100 people are smoking. Your lungs are on fire.
Well, absolutely. The thing is, we don't know all of the ins and outs yet. Is there going to be a casino attached? I would think not, but you've got alcohol tied in with casinos. So in some regards, what's that difference? Are you only going to be able to smoke in your room, at the poolside? I don't know. Those are things I haven't gotten the information on, the details yet, but that could vary a lot of the mindset, because you go into a casino in Vegas, you're walking around, you've got the alcohol being served. I don't know if they're just going to let you walk through the lobby and smoke, but maybe they will.
Well, the thing that you got to take into account with that is the aromas, and how much is the tolerance of the aromas from one person to the next.
Sure.
Alcohol, it does not emit the same type of aroma where it travels. Sure. And it will hold in a 10 by 10 foot space, or up to 100 square foot space to 1,000 square foot space. And you got to look at the number of people, the number of smokers that's involved. What does that environment does? What type of air filtration system is in place to at least cause some type of escape? There's still sprinkler systems, so it's no different than cigarettes, because those places, they allow smoking in the actual casinos, but at the same time, when you're talking about smoking marijuana, what about children walking through the casinos?
Right, and that was going to be my thing. We stayed at a couple of different hotels in Vegas, and one of them, you had to I don't know how much it happened, but you're supposed to show your ID before you walk through into that casino. That was one space we're at. The one we were at last time, that was the main lobby. So there was no intervention with those who were under 21. So there's going to be a lot of different if and ands there. And possibly this hotel might be 21 and up anyways.
It would have to be. You would have to limit the access by teenagers,
right?
Especially the teenagers,
absolutely,
and of course youth. You don't want a child to catch a contact, and still the limitations. They're still a child.
Absolutely.
And then when you go to teenagers, we don't want to contribute to their delinquency at all. So it's a tight space. It's probably like an adult resort when you go out of the country and you go to an adult only resort. So it would I can see the limitation being an adult only hotel, resort, casino, than it being open to all ages.
But at the same point with that, anybody who works in that field in this particular hotel, you would like for us to come out in spring and tour the place, do a show from there, I'm more than happy to do it.
We will definitely broadcast live from that location. So the moment that the first one goes up, we will be there. We will be in that space, inviting people to come out and definitely support that new venture.
Well, and I will say this, that MJ BizCon is out there every year. I bet a lot of those people attending that are going to want to book that hotel.
Oh, absolutely. It should be sold out. It might be either a host or sponsored hotel at that point. I could definitely see that.
So MJ BizCon, you know what? Message me. I got some ideas of some stuff we could do there.
Absolutely.
Not going to give that out here, but I'd love to talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
Now, this was brought to us one of our viewers/listeners. I was not aware of this. Did you know that a lot of states, the parents are losing their children over the confusing marijuana laws? And we kind of just talked about that with DMV.
Can you elaborate just a little bit more?
Right. So, including those who are obeying their state laws regarding possession of use of cannabis. For some people, it might seem an inconvenience that a child could be stripped from their family for something as minor as smoking a joint in the privacy of their own homes. But clearly, the state and county level child protective services are not agreeing with this. In fact, some cases, children are taken away from their parents for the good for violation of laws that don't even result in jail time. Wow. And we have a couple of examples of it. But
give me those states so that way we can make sure that the ones that are in those states stay in a legal compliance but also keep themselves safe.
Well, how about this? One of them is California. Okay. The case of Savannah Lockley, who had a legitimate prescription for marijuana and was cultivating a small amount of cannabis on her land in North California. Lacey took careful steps to ensure she was doing things according to regulations, including attendance of the community meetings that were held by local sheriffs to help growers understand how to properly follow the letter of the law regarding medical marijuana growth. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Several days later, the same sheriff's office raided their home, seized their legally grown marijuana, and forcibly took the children at gunpoint.
You know, this definitely sounds like a setup. It sounds like that she actively participated. They knew and were aware of the list, right? Of people who are growing medicinally, trying to maintain their compliance, and then literally went in because it's a Schedule 1,
right? And
knocked them over the head.
And think about it. When you go up to these meetings, I'm sure you've got an ID that you're signing in with. You're giving an address. They've got your information.
Absolutely.
So they knew.
And you also got to keep that in mind when you register your grow with the FDA. You have to give them your GPS coordinates. At any point in time, they can make an unscheduled visit. And if you have any portions of your grow over 0.03, you are in violation. Automatically, that grow is supposed to be burned, destroyed, whichever comes first. And then from there, not only do you lose your investment, you lose your freedom because you're now illegal. So please, please be aware. At the same time, you have, and this is that gray area with law enforcement. It's supposed to be neutral from one person to the next, and in this case, they were not neutral. Especially when you have responsible individuals that will actually go in and actually look to lawfully maintain their grow and their status to be totally violated without even giving any type of exception to the fact that I went in to do this the right way.
She did everything she could to maintain compliance and still was the victim of.
Yeah.
Now, further point, when I found this article, as of that moment at least, I don't know at this second, but the children, an infant and a toddler, remain in the state custody. She is permitted limited supervised visits and not allowed to breastfeed her infant because it makes the new foster mother uncomfortable. Meanwhile, she is facing fears that the county is prepared to adopt the children to new families, at which point she will unlikely see them again.
Lord have mercy. That one is very cruel, very harsh. That is a situation where in California, no matter the steps and strides that they're making in that state, that is a setback. That's an awful setback for that individual to actually have to go through. Same thing for the children. And we have to definitely, if there's any professionals that can help in that area of support, whether protesting the particular law itself, she needs some help out there. So the groups that are out there in that area, please look into this situation. What is the lady's name again?
The lady herself.
Savannah Lackey.
Yes.
Okay. We definitely need to look out for her and send her the applicable help that she can to get that situation in order.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the next one is in Idaho. An Idaho mother of 3 children suffers from MS, multiple sclerosis, uses marijuana to treat her symptoms. Now, according to her, it's the only thing that works. It's helped provide relief and made things more stable for her. When her 10-year-old boy was accused of bringing pot to school, the charges were quickly found to be baseless, but that did not stop Child Protective Service from raiding their home, seizing all 3 children.
Oh gosh, and see that's a tough situation because the mother herself, she's going through a severe affliction. MS is definitely this a debilitating disease, and at the same time, you can be not fully or totally aware. And you got a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old is just they're still learning life. They're still learning things itself. You took it to school. My gosh, that is a problem. It totally falls back on the parent, unfortunately. But in that situation, there has to be a little bit more thought into the access and restrictive access, especially for children.
Absolutely. And right now, the Reinhardts are fighting the classification, but if unsuccessful, their records will be permanently marred and could cause significant challenges later on in the future.
I definitely can see that. This is a situation for all parents involved, especially when you're dealing with young children. Once they are still subjected to being controlled by the system itself, not only do you potentially lose them to the system, but you'll be subjected to every legislation against you because of the incident. And the incident itself, especially if it involves a Schedule I going to a school, depending on the age of the child, you're looking at possible suspension, if not expulsion, from school. So those 2 things will definitely affect not only your child, but the challenges of now they go from a sociable to an isolated circumstance. What level of stress is that child being subjected to? What level of stress as a parent that you're going through now when now your child is not in school as you go to work daily, and now that child is homeschooled. So now you have to have total support if you have 2 parents in the home. If you only have 1 in the home, God knows what level of support that you have outside of that. So it's a tough situation that we have to really be very, very mindful of. So as we do have these discussions weekly, we hope that other parents are able to at least look at the outlook of what we're discussing, so that way they protect and safeguard their lives daily and can have the discussion with friends as well. We want to make this conversation normal with everyone, so that way that we can continue to push the industry forward as it should be.
Well, another thing too is what's going to happen with this child college-wise, career-wise. There's going to be some schools that they may not be able to get into now because this is on their school permanent record. And truthfully, it probably would have been better if he had just snuck out a bottle of gin or vodka or something from the family home and brought it to school.
That is true.
Than a naturally grown plant that she, again, has a prescription for.
That is true. And let's look at this perspective from one way. We all choose to make a decision to go one way or the other. And once we go the way that we're going, we have to know the resources and the outlook around that embraces that, so that way you have the support that you need. We initially talked about the education in Minnesota,
right?
That there are opportunities there. You may not be able to go to Harvard or Yale because of whatever restrictions that come up with that. So still at the same time, you're still able to achieve the higher learning that you're still looking for. So the outlook itself is what you have to get past. So within that moment, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world, yeah. But at the same time, you have to embrace certain changes as it comes to you, and it's by choice. So we want to make sure that we give everybody enough outlook for choices, so that way you have a very strong outlook and a strong decision that you can stand on.
Well, also, this child is 10 currently. On average age, that's 7 to 8 years before possibly going to college, secondary learning. These things could change in that time frame.
That's true.
We can see a lot of change between the way it's seen throughout the nation, the way it's seen for this particular case or other cases. So it's not end all be all, but it could be something that could definitely be a stumbling block.
Absolutely.
Now we're going to move to Arizona, and a disturbing case of a toddler death has been prominent in the news recently after her removal from parents who smoked marijuana. The state provided services learned the parents smoked. Their 2-year-old daughter was removed from their custody, placed first in one foster home that abused her, then subsequently was placed in a different home where the foster mother in the case murdered the child.
Oh my gosh. And see, that's the situation where when you go back to state protective services, and in the state that you're in, the laws of the land are very, very important. And I'm not particularly sure. Arizona, if you can look up Arizona, this is a situation where when you have small children and you choose to use, you still have to keep yourself, your freedoms, your life in a structure, in an order, not only that maintains you, but maintains your child. This sounds very, very harsh. The means and remedies that they went about this.
Mm-hmm.
But then obviously, when you said parents, are they talking about one, or is it both parents were involved in this?
From the way it looked like in the article that I read, it's both parents, because they said they smoked. Now, Arizona, Title 36, Chapter 28.2, the voter initiative allows adults over age of 21 to possess, purchase, transport, or process 1 ounce or less of marijuana or 5 grams or less of marijuana concentrate.
Okay. One thing that I noticed, that when you said that, is there an inclusion or something pertaining to with a child? Because obviously as an adult, you're responsible at 21, but you're not talking about anybody that's under 21. So having a child, there's the circumstance that comes along with that. And I'm sure because no one just go look at that, you just kind of leave that part out.
Right.
So you can't leave that part out. You definitely have to approach it the right way. It's 21. Your child's not 21. So what happens with your possession with a child?
No, exactly. Now, I don't see it, but what I do see is you cannot, of course, drive while impaired from the effects of it.
That's understood.
Employers can still prohibit the use while working, completely understood. You can't smoke it in public places. Police can no longer perform a warrantless search if they smell it.
See, that part is very, very important. And then, even then, what about the officers who have been working in their career a decade or more? They're still set in their ways, stuck in their ways where they were trained, and the update just did not apply to them. They still go about it the same way. They still can terrorize and victimize any individual that they come into access with, which means that when we talk about training regarding police, the training should have a level of understanding, sensitivity, but also resetting the mindset, the training, anything that you received before, so that way there's a new protocol and you're certified in the new protocols. And as we talk about the deeper issues when it comes to law enforcement, those are the things that will protect the public even better if those updates were applied to the officers as well. The public definitely needs to know. They definitely need to be aware of the do's and don'ts when it comes to not only themselves, but what happens with them with their child. Not having access to the areas where you actually use and consume. So if there's an area or room in the house, if it has to be under a combination lock, you just got to make sure that your child don't have that combination lock. Or even if it's a key lock, you want to make sure that that area stays locked. You're able to go in there and consume, stay isolated from your child, and they're not exposed to it or have access to it. That's just really important. So the adult themselves are just as responsible for anything, just as much as the law is responsible for allowing the adults to use, but the adults using their discretion to not expose their child to these things. So it's just a total mashup, but at the same time, the adults got to be a little bit more responsible.
Well, the thing is, too, there's more to that story than what we've covered so far.
Okay.
Other sources have stated that there's a little more to it than just the pot smoking, including a medical condition, didn't state what it was, that made it difficult for the mother to care for the girl. But reports do not appear to coincide with the idea that that was the primary reason for the removal of this girl.
All right. So that's right there. It gives me a particular area of concern. So if it was difficult for the mother to care for the little girl, obviously there is a disconnect between child services and then, to my knowledge and understanding, every school, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school, has a school counselor.
Correct.
So there's this thing called student support services. Between the parent and the school, somebody dropped the ball. I mean, totally dropped the ball. So the one thing that I want to say in this podcast is that student support services, you seek it. It has all the remedies that you're supposed to have. And if it's not there, you call the school superintendent for that county. You make them totally aware of what you need and what type of help the city or that county is supposed to provide those services. Student support. So parents, please make sure that you know all of the things that are available to you that will help you get through matters like this here when you don't have it in-house. It's very important.
Well, but keep in mind, though, the child was 2 years old. Yeah. So probably was not in any of those services. But regardless.
Yeah, that's even tougher when you have an adolescent or an infant or a toddler. It makes it even tougher. And then the one thing about this world, whether you have family or not, those things are very, very important, whether you have support. So once again, in this situation, for younger children, parent, you really just have to look at what level of support that you have. So that way, if you do choose to use, that you use it safely, but you're doing it in the best interest of your household.
Now, here's one that's very interesting. Diane Fornbacher is a award-winning activist and journalist who has championed the fight of medical marijuana and other legislations related to cannabis. Now, her 9-year-old son was asked during an Earth Day event. Earth Day, natural, all these things. In the school, when asked during this event what could be done to help the planet, the boy, and I think this is very, very smart of the child, responded that hemp could be used to help alleviate many problems. Shortly afterward, child protective workers showed up at their door looking for answers. Now, no charges were filed and her son was not removed from her care, but the case could have been different if it did not have public recognition and clout that she had earned from investigating and reporting on these and similar hot button topics.
Keyword clout.
Correct.
That's your status in society. If you don't have no clout, you're going to have a lot of problems. This one here still don't have to necessarily fall back on the parent, but a child emulates their parent.
Correct.
They're their biggest influence.
Yes.
In a child's life is their parent. So you can't hold a child responsible for the things and the choices that their parent make. A child still can evolve on a higher level than their own parent.
Correct.
So even in that, I mean, thank God that the parent didn't go through changes that could have tore up their household. But at the same time, once again, you want to make sure the formalities of life, you have all the knowledge. Because this parent had clout, that means that she had all the applicable knowledge. She was outspoken enough to make sure it's clearly expressed, clearly understood. So now when you go back and attack this person, they can defend themselves.
Right. And I'm sure she's got multiple political advocates in her corner, lawyers, whatever. We've seen this a lot of times throughout judicial systems. We always talk about how you are innocent until proven guilty. Right. Everybody's supposed to get the same, but let's be honest, people don't.
Right.
Whether it be their influence in the state, the city, their family, the wealth, however, everybody's judged differently. Shouldn't be, but they are.
Well, the beautiful thing is, in most cases in the world and in life, it's about who you know. Yeah. And obviously with clout, she knew the route.
Absolutely.
People. So that's what that boils down to.
But before I go further on that, the one thing is, I think that child was very smart to be able to, at that age, say hemp could help alleviate many problems. Now, he didn't say what they were. He didn't say whether that would be building homes or helping people that, for example, have MS. He just simply stated, at least from what we see, it could alleviate many problems. He didn't say what those problems were.
Yeah.
But he's right.
Obviously, his education and inclination needs to be looked at and observed. He definitely, or she, can be above the standard.
Correct.
For their particular age group. So there are exceptions to this rule, to this world, when it comes to individuals, and they have to look at that as on an individual basis.
Correct. And he was 9 years old. Yeah. 9 years old, I had no clue what hemp could do, let alone what hemp was.
The exposure is different.
Yes.
I mean, we're in 2023. So if you go back 20 years to 2003, the discussion regarding this space is totally different now.
Still hushed. Don't talk.
Yeah. It's a taboo.
Absolutely.
Totally a taboo.
It still is, just not as strong as a stigma as it was.
Right.
Now, whether you are for or against the legalization of this, removing children from their parents and breaking apart families doesn't seem to be the right answer at all.
No.
Especially true considering the wide recognition and devastating impacts that alcohol abuse has had on this country.
Right.
I mean, I know people myself who their family had family members who were heavy drinkers. And guess what? There was mental abuse. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, on top of not knowing whether this individual may even come back home if they didn't drink in their own domicile.
Right.
So we've seen that. And this creates, as we stated before, hypocrisy. It's okay to have beer, a glass of wine, whether it be at the bar, at home. Responsible would be at home, but let's be honest, it doesn't happen that often. But smoking pot and your kids can be taken from you and adopted out to other people that you may never know or have contact with.
No, that's pretty cruel. And when you look at the normalcy in this matter, there's nothing normal about it. Cigarettes are just as equally harmful. I mean, you can die from lung cancer, emphysema, dealing with that. Alcohol, cirrhosis of the liver. You can lose your liver function which can also you can die from alcohol poisoning.
Absolutely.
So when you look at the cannabis space, it's definitely not the opioids where you take too much, you die. Just like taking 12 aspirin, you're gonna die.
Right.
So I mean, something needs to change. The people who are controlling this narrative when it comes to this space, you can clearly see the biasness. It's totally unbiased. It's a totally biased circumstance, and when you mitigate all the factors from alcohol, use of prescription drugs, whether they're opiates or whatever. Come on, cannabis. What's the difference?
Well, the question is, of course, I'm sure what they're going to refer to most is child endangerment. Now, it's the crime, for the people who don't know, refer to parents who put their minors in a situation where death or serious injury is likely to occur. Now, we saw where death happened because the child was removed from the circumstance, not still in that circumstance.
Right.
And as you stated, most everybody we know that uses cannabis of one form or another are not violent individuals.
No.
So aside from the fact of maybe catching something on fire, are these people endangering their child, causing death or serious injury likely to occur? I don't think so.
I totally agree with that. There's another thing that you also need to look at from an accountability standpoint. Because that agency placed that child in danger, they're responsible.
Absolutely. They should be. They need to
They
be.
should be held totally accountable. The problem is the parents probably going through so much of a drawback from the circumstance and the loss, grieving from the loss of their child, that having a strong mindset and then challenging a legal authority, which is whether it's a government agency, is tough. Being prepared for that fight financially, mind, body, and soul, is definitely a challenge. So, my sympathy is definitely with that parent, with them losing that child. But at the same time, we as parents, we have to be better for our children. So when the decisions that we make, not only can we protect our children, but our children will be protected as well.
Right. Now, little fact that I got here a little bit further, as we've said, the endangerment may apply to marijuana, and use will depend on the other circumstances, which they should. But for example, a court will most likely deem that blowing the smoke at a child or consistently smoking in the presence would constitute child endangerment. Now, me personally, no, you should not be blowing it in their face, just like you shouldn't blow cigarette smoke. But I have not seen anything on this where they are smoking in front or blowing it at the child. They just say that it's happening on their property, which they may be on the back porch. Child might be in their own room.
That is true. I think that overall in this space right here, it is very trivial. And what I mean by that is the choices that the adult make has to be clear. But the education and the awareness of the laws itself, we have to put this out there, discuss this openly, so that parents understand the do's and don'ts. There are a lot of parents that just live life vicariously. They live for the day, they live for the moment, and don't even realize some situations that are beyond their control that will change their life, change their child's life. So we want to give the power and put the power back in your hand. And it's very, very clear that you understand clearly the law.
Well, now to the point of what you just stated, for example, this is similar to how courts will view parents who consume alcohol irresponsibly or store alcohol in a location that's easily accessible to the child. So they could be stating that they have their marijuana sitting out to where the child can get it, because we've heard multiple stories of children across the nation eating edibles.
That is true. And that's something that when we've talked about that discussion over and over. Even the protective containers that is supposed to be childproof,
right,
are no longer childproof.
They can get in it easier.
They can look on YouTube and literally figure out how to get into that jar without doing anything. Because guess what? There's a YouTube showing a marketing of how safe it is and what you need to do, but it's giving an example of how to get in.
Correct. Yeah.
Bottom line, even with cabinets can be pried open, and so even if you put a lock on there, that child don't have a problem breaking a lock off.
No.
What you're gonna do? Spank them, smack their hand. So you still have situations that the parent may have to have a room that's under lock and key, double lock and key, that they can go and use and also store those restricted items from their children.
Yep. Now, applying that rationale that we just talked about, it's possible that marijuana use could be included in the activity that would qualify as child endangerment. Some other factors the court may consider, and we don't know about this in these particular cases, such cases are whether a child was injured and if the child has access to the drugs. A state may remove a child from the custody of their parents regardless of marital status or divorce. Such cases will usually begin with the police before the state agency is called. Whether CPS gets involved for weed or not depend on the factors of the amount of the danger, the harm of the child is exposed to, the parent's use, and another number, say, of incidents where police or other entities had been involved in this location previously.
So I had an interesting thought that popped into my mind. So when you use the smoke, and it can totally inundate your clothes.
Correct.
Is the odor in your clothes strong enough to create an endangerment for the child?
Well, that's a good question, because we noticed earlier where I think it was Arizona, they eliminated the smell warrant. So if the officer smells it, they cannot now do the no-knock warrant. But yes, they could go get one.
Right. And so let's dive into that a little bit further. So let's just say you go out to your car and you smoke in your car and you roll your windows up.
You're being responsible. You're doing it properly. But now here's the question before you go to the next step. Most of our keys now have push to start, correct?
Absolutely.
If you were in the driver's seat and you're smoking and you have this in your hand,
even in your park,
you could now be charged with intent to drive.
DUI.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even being responsible, understand the other underlying situations and what could be caused.
Great point. And this is for all of the parents who are trying to be responsible. That is so important to understand how all the laws apply. Sitting in the driver's seat, sitting in the passenger seat. Total difference in between the two.
Well, also keep in mind, too, a lot of our vehicles, of course, are now used with electric windows. To roll down the window, your car at least has to be in the position. Correct. So if an officer comes, knocks on your window, your response is to roll down the window, correct? At that point, that's now intent to drive because you've started the car.
Absolutely. You caught up. It's a catch-22.
Absolutely it is. And let's be honest, there is some impairment when you smoke. So your first response is, let me roll down the window. Well, you've just entered their trap.
Yeah. Yeah, it is some complexities that are there. I'm glad we're talking about this here. So for everybody that's listening, please pay attention.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, these are things that I never would have thought of, but I've been told. And hey, I mean, like we said, your first thought is, what do they need? What do they want? Let me respond. Well, now by doing such, just like when officer pulls you over, a lot of times they say, do you know why I pulled you over? They're fishing for an answer.
Right.
If you have been pulled over and they ask you to step out of the car, you've now conceded the right to allow them to search the vehicle because you stepped out.
Right. The panic and everything that goes
Absolutely.
beyond that, you are set up for failure at that point. So please be aware. Please be more responsible in these circumstances.
Right. So now many officials will not consider the use by itself enough to charge a parent with the type of child abuse or neglect that would warrant the removal of the custody rights. If a parent is accused of substance abuse, though, CPS may step in and conduct a further assessment of the child's home and or the parent figures.
The assessments I can see and I can understand that.
Absolutely.
And I think what needs to happen is that as the state seeks to keep everyone safe, including the child and the families involved, I still feel more education.
Yes.
More counseling for the parent. More support services for the parent to make sure that the parent stays safe and the child stays safe. You'd rather the child stay with the parent.
Correct.
the mental well-being, the future of that child, you never know how you're tearing that child apart if you're ripping them away from their parent. So the parent themselves, it's a catch-22 because you go to them to get the services. Now they know who you are. Oh, you're out here endangering your child. They're going to come in your home, raid it, and uproot your child from your home.
Mm-hmm.
Totally wrong. What needs to happen now with this circumstance and this discussion is legislation itself. The biasness in it needs to be eliminated. There needs to be some form of accountability for the legislators that are there who have the old mindsets. Hey, this is still criminal. You're going to jail. They need an update as well. Anyone that's in political office, just because they made it to office and they were the highest qualified candidate, they were the highest qualified candidate, but that don't mean that they're the most knowledgeable and the most educated candidate.
Well, like I said, just because they were the most qualified on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe their opponent was a 3, they were a 4.
Exactly.
Didn't mean they were 5 stars.
Great point.
They were just better.
A smidgen better.
But now keep in mind, too, verbiage is very, very important in these things because we saw the case, and I don't remember the name, but the individual who was deemed protecting their property a few years back, he was on trial. The prosecutor kept stating, if somebody steps on your property, are you allowed to protect? Yes. If somebody breaks into your home, are you allowed to protect? Yes. He kept baiting with questions of yes, yes, yes. So then when he were to state, so you think it's okay to walk down the street with the gun? The first response was yes. Wait, no. And the reason why I'm stating that is because during a home evaluation, agents from the agency will search for physical, sexual, psychological, emotional abuse towards the child. And may also look for signs of neglect or depriving them. Their findings will be compiled in a report that is sent to the court for further examination. The court will have the discretion on whether to order CPS to monitor, conduct checks on how the parent continues to care for the child. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is, let's be honest, one-on-one, they might be asking questions. Do they give you enough food? Well, maybe the child wanted cookies, so their answer is no. Doesn't mean that that's really what's happening. Has he ever hurt you? Well, maybe, they were doing something and he accidentally bumped him. He didn't do it with malice
or discipline.
Correct. Yeah. So what the child states during those questions could be used against you in multiple forms.
Totally. And the unfortunate part about that is that the questions itself, and I hate to say this, I have an attorney.
Yeah.
Because your attorney can object to questions. You can also look to your attorney to kind of advise you and guide you as far as the things that you say. But these are things that can get you caught up and change your life quickly.
Absolutely.
So once again, when you go back to the individual states, please look at the catch clauses that are there. State says that, well, you can possess. But under what circumstances? Mm-hmm. So now when you have a circumstance that can be changed or the narrative is written differently in the ticket or citation that you're issued, I'm sorry, you got to go through some changes. So for everyone that's out there, please be careful.
Well, and what the most important factor should be from the court end is to gather all this information, analyze whether the parent's use of it places the child in any sort of danger. Thus, even if the parent legally is prescribed medicinal for legitimate medical conditions, the parent must take the same precautions they would with other things such as a gun or any other pain medicine and make sure that they have it locked up and secured.
Absolutely. Totally right about that.
Many states have begun legal recreation of marijuana as opposed to just for medicinal reasons. However, the legal status is particular in each state and has no bearing on the court's decision when it comes to custody. So those things you've got to know, for instance, it's legal for adults to consume alcohol. They must do so in a responsible manner that will not hurt the child. These are the same laws we've got to have with all of this, from cannabis, smoking, everything else, including the edibles.
Yeah, as you go and dive into this even further, the legalities with this here should be provided in a pamphlet. If not a pamphlet, it should definitely be in some form of a course that the parent can receive. Unfortunately, I wouldn't go to a course that the county or city is sponsoring because your name can easily go on a list.
Absolutely.
So definitely trying to find the information and getting it posted on a website somewhere. We need to look into that. If we don't do it, someone else needs to do it.
Well, and for example, as we start to close down in this hour, which is always quick, experienced child custody lawyers, keep that in mind. Experienced child custody lawyers, not only will they be able to help you assist in navigating the laws and the legal procedures affecting your rights, they can also defend your interest against accusations of habitual drug use, which will probably happen, and or improperly administrating drug tests. Now, in addition to that, if you have failed a drug test in the past and are looking to regain custody of your child after completing a drug treatment program, your lawyer can help you file a petition to modify you and your spouse's child custody arrangement with the court. And lastly, your lawyer can also present an argument on your behalf in front of the judge on why your custody rights should be restored. So you've got to do your research and get the proper legal representation in there for yourself, your family, and your child.
And the thing about that, it goes back to being able to afford it, Nate.
Absolutely.
Period, point blank, bottom line, everybody can't afford it. So for wherever they can find it in self-education, I encourage all the parents to make sure you're empowered as you try to maintain a piece of the balance in this world. And what I must say is that we have had a great hour of information that we've passed on to parents, the discussions regarding their rights, the laws, the responsibilities that you're supposed to have, not only for yourself, but your child. Is so important. Decisions. Everyone, please be aware of the decisions that you make, where you're at, so that way it does not affect where you're at.
No, absolutely. And David, I thank you for bringing this to our attention because this is a very, very important topic that, like I stated to you individually, it's something I haven't thought about before, but it's real, it's important. And these are the type of things that we want to do our research and get information out there to help people because there are many people, many families, and the children being affected by this across this nation.
All across the nation. Every state, every city, everyone be aware. And the most important thing is know your rights. The ground that you stand on, you control it. Where you stand at, you may not always control it, but what you want to do is put yourself where you have the control at.
Absolutely.
So that's important.
Absolutely. In closing, give me a couple of closing comments there and then let people know how they can reach out to you and get in touch.
Definitely check me out. Follow me, Big Boy Sam on IG. Follow me, Sammy Murphy on LinkedIn as well. Definitely thank everybody for tuning in today, getting the word and the information. We just want to provide more information and insight on the industry of being able to safely use, consume, and potentially sell for the most part. So what's going on from one city or state to the next, we're just putting it out there to keep the industry growing. So until the next week, thank you for tuning in. So you, Nate.
Yeah, and David, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention because this was a very important discussion. And like we said before, anybody else, you've got questions, you've got topics, please send them to us. That's something, for example, I wouldn't have thought of, but I should have. So I appreciate that. You can connect with me on Instagram and Twitter, DJNQ75. And we look forward to a great week. Everybody stay safe out there, and we'll see you next Wednesday.